Help my mom.
What happens when a 5-year-old girl interrupts the most powerful werewolf on the continent during a formal treaty negotiation by screaming for help? Lyra Harris didn't understand protocol, didn't know about diplomatic immunity, didn't care that her mother's attackers were protected nobles from the Crimson Veil territory. She just knew her mother was dying in an alley 3 blocks away, and the only person who looked strong enough to stop it was the terrifying man in the black coat everyone called the Alpha King. So she grabbed Douglas Huerta's hand with bloody fingers and sobbed 4 words that would change everything: "Help my mother. Please." What Douglas did next didn't just shock the assembled dignitaries. It froze the entire pack in a moment of collective horror as they watched their king cross a line no ruler had dared cross in 200 years. And the worst part? He did it all while still holding that little girl's hand. Think this is a simple rescue story? You're wrong. Because what nobody knows yet, not the little girl, not her dying mother, not even the Alpha King himself, is that Thelma Harris has been running from Douglas Huerta for 6 years. She's the mate he's been searching for across 3 continents. The woman who disappeared the night before their bonding ceremony. And her daughter Lyra? She's the secret Douglas never knew existed. Hit that subscribe button, because this story is about to detonate every werewolf romance trope while a 5-year-old accidentally reunites her parents through the worst possible circumstances. The Summit of Territories was supposed to prevent a war, not start one. Douglas Huerta, Alpha King of the Shadow Peak Dominion, sat at the head of a massive obsidian table surrounded by territorial leaders who hated him only slightly less than they hated each other. The grand negotiation chamber of the Continental Hall was designed to impress and intimidate in equal measure: vaulted ceilings that disappeared into shadow, ancient tapestries depicting centuries of werewolf history, and windows that overlooked the capital city of Viridia sprawling below. 3 days. They'd been locked in these negotiations for 3 excruciating days, every clause of the proposed peace treaty dissected and weaponized, every diplomatic overture laced with barely concealed threats. The air was thick with tension, territorial posturing, and the kind of political maneuvering that made Douglas's head ache. He was exhausted, furious, and trying very hard not to let either show on his face because weakness at a summit like this was blood in the water. The Crimson Veil delegation was particularly insufferable. Lord Veyron Ashcroft, their representative, sat across from Douglas with the smug satisfaction of someone who thought he held all the cards. For the past 6 hours, Veyron had been arguing that Shadow Peak's territorial boundaries should be reconsidered given their aggressive expansion over the past decade. Which was diplomatic speak for, "We want your land and we're testing whether you're weak enough for us to take it." Douglas had been preparing a response that would shut down that conversation permanently, his fingers steepled in front of his face, his gold eyes calculating the exact phrasing that would be devastating without technically violating summit protocols, when the doors to the negotiation chamber burst open. The sound was like a gunshot in the tense silence. Every head turned. Security guards stationed at various points around the chamber moved toward the interruption, hands going to weapons. A child stood in the doorway. Tiny. Maybe 5 years old, though Douglas was terrible at estimating children's ages. Dressed in clothes that had probably been clean that morning but were now covered in dirt and something that looked disturbingly like blood. Her dark hair was tangled, escaping from what might have once been a neat braid. Her face was streaked with tears, and her eyes, wide and terrified and desperately searching, swept across the assembled territorial leaders with the frantic energy of someone drowning. The entire room went silent. Even Veyron stopped mid-sentence, his mouth hanging open in shock at the breach of protocol. "Security," someone barked. "Remove the child immediately." 2 guards rushed forward to intercept her, their movements efficient and professional. But the little girl was fast. She dodged between the first guards reaching hands with the desperate agility of someone running for their life, ducked under the second guard's attempt to grab her, and kept running. Straight toward Douglas. Like he was magnetic north and she was a compass with no other option. She ran the length of that massive negotiation table, her small footsteps echoing against marble floors, while 17 territorial leaders watched in stunned silence. The guards pursued, but she was small and quick and absolutely determined. When she reached Douglas's seat at the head of the table, she didn't slow down. Just grabbed his arm with sticky fingers he belatedly realized were covered in blood, not hers, thank God, but someone else's, and looked up at him with eyes that were drowning in tears and terror. "Sir," she sobbed, her voice breaking on the word. "Sir, please, you have to help. They're hurting my mother. They won't stop. She's bleeding and they won't stop and I don't know what to do and please, please help." Douglas stared down at this child, this impossible interruption to the most important diplomatic meeting of the decade, and felt the entire world narrow to her tear-stained face. He'd been an alpha king for 8 years. Had navigated coups, assassination attempts, territorial disputes, and political machinations that would make most people's heads spin. He'd been trained from birth to prioritize the greater good over individual suffering, to make hard choices for the stability of his territory, to never let emotion override strategic thinking. But this child was looking at him like he was her last hope in a world that had turned terrifying and cruel. And Douglas Huerta, Alpha King of the Shadow Peak Dominion, felt something in his chest that he'd thought died 6 years ago when Thelma Harris disappeared. The protective instinct of a mate recognizing family. Because this child smelled like Thelma. Faint but unmistakable, buried under fierce sweat and blood and dirt, was the scent he'd been searching for across 3 continents. The scent that haunted his dreams. The scent of the woman who'd vanished the night before their bonding ceremony without explanation or goodbye. "Where's your mother?" Douglas heard himself ask, his voice surprisingly calm despite the tsunami of emotions trying to drown him. "The alley," the little girl gasped, her small hands tightening on his sleeve. "Behind the red market. The men with the red marks on their coats, they found her, they said she stole something but she didn't steal anything, she's a good mama, and they're hurting her and she told me to run but I couldn't leave her alone and then I saw you through the window and I knew you could stop them because you look like the kings in my storybooks and kings save people, that's what they do, so please, please." Red marks on their coats. Douglas's gaze snapped to Lord Veyron Ashcroft, who'd gone very pale very quickly. The crimson veil uniform bore distinctive red emblems on the shoulders. Veyron's personal guard wore those marks. "Your men?" Douglas asked softly, his tone deadly calm. The room went even quieter, if that was possible. Several territorial leaders leaned forward, sensing blood. "I have no idea what this child is talking about," Veyron replied, but his eyes betrayed him. A flash of recognition. A calculation happening behind his careful diplomatic mask. "She's clearly confused. Traumatized. Children often misremember details under stress." "She seems pretty specific about the red marks," Douglas observed. "And about the location. The red market is 3 blocks from here, isn't it?" "Your Majesty," one of Veyron's advisors interjected smoothly, "surely you don't intend to disrupt these crucial negotiations based on a child's hysterical accusations." Douglas looked down at the little girl still gripping his arm. Her tears had stopped, replaced by desperate hope. She believed he would help. Trusted him completely despite having every reason not to trust any adult right now. That trust did something to him. Cracked open a part of his heart he'd locked away 6 years ago. "This summit," he announced, standing and pulling the little girl gently to his side, "is adjourned. Indefinitely." The chamber erupted. "You can't simply abandon treaty negotiations. This is highly irregular. The Continental Accord requires." Douglas's Alpha command rolled across the room like thunder, silencing everyone. "I can. I just did. My territory, my rules. If any of you have objections, file them formally with my council. Until then, this summit is over." His beta, Corbin Thorne, was suddenly at his elbow, his scarred face tight with concern. Your Majesty, if you walk out of this summit, every territorial leader in this room will see it as weakness. They'll question your judgment. They'll use it against you in every future negotiation. Then they'll have to adjust their perception, Douglas replied, not taking his eyes off the little girl. Because right now, someone is dying 3 blocks away while we argue about border adjustments. I know which matters more. Douglas, Corbin tried again, dropping formality in desperation. I'm going. Douglas looked at his beta. You can either come with me or manage the political fallout here. Your choice. Corbin's jaw tightened. Then he nodded once, accepting the inevitable. I'll come. Someone needs to document whatever you're about to do. Douglas knelt in front of the little girl, bringing himself to her eye level. What's your name? Lyra, she whispered. Lyra Harris. Harris. Thelma's surname. The confirmation hit Douglas like a physical blow. Okay, Lyra Harris. I'm going to help your mother. But I need you to do exactly what I say. Can you do that? Lyra nodded with fierce determination. Good girl. Show me where she is. Lyra grabbed his hand, her small fingers wrapping around his much larger ones with complete trust, and pulled him toward the door. Behind them, the negotiation chamber descended into chaos. Accusations flying. Dayron denying everything while his advisors scrambled to contain the damage. Other territorial leaders sensing opportunity in Douglas's apparent loss of control. But Douglas Huerta, Alpha King of the Shadow Peak Dominion, walked out of that room holding a 5-year-old's hand and didn't look back. Because 6 years ago, he'd lost his maid under mysterious circumstances that still haunted him. And if there was even a chance, even the smallest possibility, that this child was leading him back to her, then diplomatic consequences be damned. The Red Market was 3 blocks away. What Douglas found there would change everything. Lyra led Douglas through the streets of Viridia with the confidence of someone who'd navigated them many times before. That observation lodged in Douglas's brain like a splinter. His mate had been living in the capital city, the heart of his own territory, possibly for years. Under his nose. While he'd been searching the entire continent for her. The questions were piling up faster than he could process them, but Douglas forced himself to focus on the immediate crisis. There would be time for answers later. Right now, someone was dying. The Red Market district was crowded even in late afternoon. Vendors were packing up their stalls, workers heading home, the usual controlled chaos of a commercial area transitioning from day to evening operations. Lyra wove through the crowd with practiced ease, never letting go of Douglas's hand, her small face set with grim determination. Corbin followed close behind, along with Ravenna Locke, Douglas's head of security, who'd materialized from wherever she'd been stationed during the summit. 2 other guards flanked them, hands on weapons, scanning for threats. There, Lyra said, pointing toward a narrow alley between a textile warehouse and what looked like an abandoned storage facility. They took her in there. Douglas heard the sounds before he saw anything. Male laughter, harsh and cruel. The wet thud of fists hitting flesh. A woman's labored breathing, the kind that came from broken ribs and punctured lungs. And underneath it all, a scent that made Douglas's wolf rise to the surface with devastating recognition. Thelma. He stopped at the alley entrance, his hand tightening unconsciously around Lyra's. Stay here, he commanded, using just enough alpha authority to ensure she'd obey. Don't move. Don't follow me. Don't run. Stay exactly in this spot until I come back for you. Lyra's lower lip trembled, but she nodded, her small body going rigid as the command took hold. Douglas looked at Ravenna. Guard her. If anything, and I mean anything, happens to this child, I will hold you personally responsible. Understood, Your Majesty. Ravenna positioned herself beside Lyra, her hand on her weapon. Then Douglas walked into the alley, Corbin at his shoulder. 3 men in crimson veil colors surrounded a woman on the ground. She was curled into a defensive position, arms protecting her head, but blood seeped through her clothes from multiple wounds. The men were taking turns kicking her, laughing between blows, clearly in no hurry to finish the job. Douglas recognized her instantly, despite the blood and bruises. Thelma Harris. His mate. The woman who disappeared 6 years ago, leaving him with questions that ate at him every single day. She was thinner than he remembered, her face marked with scars that hadn't been there before, her dark hair now streaked with premature gray. But it was unmistakably her. And she was being beaten to death by Veyron's men. The mate bond, which Douglas had thought severed when Thelma ran, flared to life with agonizing intensity. Not broken. Not even damaged. Just dormant. Waiting for proximity to reactivate. The rush of emotions through the bond nearly brought Douglas to his knees, Thelma's pain, her terror, her desperate exhaustion, and underneath it all, her fierce determination to survive for Lyra's sake. One of the attackers noticed Douglas and Corbin. He was the largest of the three, with a scar running down his face and the kind of casual cruelty that came from years of getting away with violence. "Alpha King," he said with mocking deference. "This doesn't concern you. The woman owes Lord Veyron a debt. We're simply collecting." "What debt?" Douglas asked, his voice terrifyingly calm. "She stole something valuable. Information belonging to Crimson Vale. We're taking it back." "By beating her to death in my territory?" The man shrugged. "Lord Veyron gave us diplomatic immunity for this assignment. We're protected under continental law. You can't touch us." Douglas felt something cold and sharp settle in his chest. "Thelma Harris is my mate." All three men froze. "She owes nothing to Crimson Vale," Douglas continued, his voice dropping to a deadly quiet. "But you three owe me an explanation for why you're assaulting my mate in my territory. You have 30 seconds before I stop being civil." The scarred leader's confidence cracked. Your Majesty, we had no idea she we were told she was just a civilian, a thief, we didn't know." "I didn't ask for your excuses," Douglas interrupted. "I asked for an explanation." 20 seconds. The man tried a different tactic. "Lord Veyron will file formal complaints if you interfere. We have diplomatic immunity. The Continental Accord." 15 seconds. Thelma had managed to sit up, leaning against the alley wall. Her eyes met Douglas's, and he saw recognition flood her battered face. Recognition and terror and something that looked almost like relief. "Douglas," she whispered, blood on her lips. "You can't. The political consequences are irrelevant," Douglas finished. 10 seconds. The scarred leader made a choice. He ran. Or tried to. Douglas moved with the enhanced speed of an Alpha King at the peak of his power. He caught the man before he'd taken 3 steps, his hand wrapping around the attacker's throat, lifting him off the ground with effortless strength. "I said you had 30 seconds to explain," Douglas said conversationally. "I didn't say you could leave." What happened next was brutal and efficient. The other 2 attackers tried to intervene. Corbin handled one with practiced competence, disarming him and forcing him to the ground. Douglas dealt with the other while still holding the leader by his throat, moving with a violence that was controlled but devastating. He didn't kill them. Not immediately. But he made sure they'd never forget this moment. Made sure they'd carry the scars as permanent reminders of what happened when you touched something that belonged to the Alpha King. When it was done, when all 3 attackers were on the ground, broken but alive, Douglas finally turned his full attention to Thelma. She was trying to stand, to maintain some dignity, but her legs wouldn't support her. Douglas caught her before she fell, and the moment his hands touched her bare skin, the mate bond exploded between them. 6 years of separation hit all at once. The bond flooded Douglas with everything Thelma had been feeling during their time apart: loneliness, fear, desperate love for their daughter, and constant, gnawing regret for the choice she'd made. "Why did you run?" Douglas asked, his voice rough with emotion. Thelma's laugh was bitter and painful. "To save her. To save our daughter. Our daughter." The confirmation of what Douglas had already suspected still hit him like a physical blow. "Lyra," he said. "Lyra," Thelma confirmed, tears mixing with blood on her face. "I was pregnant when I left. I didn't know. They told me if I went through with the bonding ceremony, the poison they'd given me would kill us both. I had to choose between loving you and protecting our child." "Poison?" Douglas's arms tightened around her. "What poison?" "I'll explain everything," Thelma promised, her voice fading. "But first, you need to get Lyra somewhere safe. They know about her now. They'll come for her to get to me." "No one is coming for our daughter," Douglas said firmly. "And no one is taking you from me again." He lifted Thelma effortlessly, cradling her against his chest. She was too light, he realized with growing anger. Malnourished. Exhausted. Her body carrying the weight of 6 years of constant running and fear. "Corbin, secure the prisoners," Douglas ordered. "I want them in Shadow Peak custody. Diplomatic immunity or not, they assaulted my mate. That supersedes any political protection. Your Majesty, Lord Veyron can file his complaints directly with me." Douglas's tone left no room for argument. He carried Thelma out of the alley. Lyra was exactly where he'd left her, Ravenna standing guard, but the moment the little girl saw her mother in Douglas's arms, she broke the Alpha command through sheer force of will and ran to them. "Mama. Is Mama okay? Did the king save her?" "I saved her," Douglas confirmed, adjusting his hold so Lyra could see Thelma's face. "But she's hurt. We need to get her to healers immediately." "The medical wing at Shadow Peak Hold," Ravenna suggested. "It's 15 minutes by vehicle, 5 if we use the emergency transport." "Emergency transport," Douglas decided. "And get Saskia Winterbourne. She's the best healer we have." As Ravenna made the necessary calls, Thelma's hand found Douglas's face, her fingers trembling. "You don't understand what you've just done," she whispered. "The political consequences of assaulting Veyron's men, of walking out of the summit." "I don't care," Douglas interrupted. "You're my mate. She's my daughter. Anyone who has a problem with me protecting my family can challenge me directly." Through the bond, he felt Thelma's shock. Her disbelief that he would choose her over politics. Her desperate, traitorous hope that maybe, just maybe, he meant it. "I always mean it," Douglas said, responding to her unspoken emotion. "I've been searching for you for 6 years, Thelma. Did you really think I'd let you go a second time?" Thelma's eyes filled with fresh tears. "You don't know everything. The poison, the people who want me dead, the secrets I'm carrying, it's so much worse than you think." "Then you'll tell me everything," Douglas replied. "After you're healed and safe. Right now, all that matters is getting you to medical care." The emergency transport arrived, an armored vehicle with a medical team already inside. They loaded Thelma onto a stretcher with practiced efficiency, Saskia Winterbourne appearing from somewhere and immediately beginning assessment. Lyra refused to let go of her mother's hand, climbing into the vehicle despite multiple attempts to keep her out. "She stays," Douglas commanded, settling into the transport beside his maid and daughter. "Both of them stay with me." The ride to Shadow Peak Hold was the longest 15 minutes of Douglas's life. Saskia worked on Thelma with focused intensity, stabilizing bleeding, setting broken bones, administering medications. The healer's expression grew increasingly grim. "Your Majesty," Saskia said quietly, "her injuries are extensive. Broken ribs, internal bleeding, severe contusions. But that's not the worst of it." "What's the worst of it?" Douglas asked, dreading the answer. "She's been poisoned." Thornvale extract, unless I'm mistaken. A substance that doesn't kill quickly but accumulates in the system over time. Saskia met his eyes. How long has she been exposed? 6 years, Thelma answered, her voice weak. They've been dosing me for 6 years. I thought I'd escaped, but they always found me eventually. Saskia's face went pale. 6 years of Thornvale exposure. Your Majesty, the damage to her system is catastrophic. I can treat the immediate injuries, but the poison has been building for so long. Can you cure it? Douglas demanded. I don't know. I need to run tests, consult references, possibly contact specialists in toxicology. Saskia hesitated. But I need you to understand, 6 years is a long time. The poison may have already done irreversible damage. Douglas felt the mate bond pulse with Thelma's resignation. She'd known this was coming. Had been waiting for the poison to finally kill her. You're not dying, he told her firmly. I don't care what it takes, what specialists we need to consult, what experimental treatments we have to try. You're not dying. You can't just decree someone healthy, Thelma said with a weak smile. Watch me, Douglas replied, earning a surprised laugh that turned into a painful cough. Lyra, who'd been silent and wide-eyed through the entire medical assessment, spoke up with heartbreaking seriousness. My mama is very strong. She's been sick for a long time, but she never stopped taking care of me. She'll get better now because you'll help her. That's what kings do. Out of the mouths of children. They reached Shadow Peak Hold as the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the ancient fortress that had been Douglas's home his entire life. The medical wing was ready for them, a full team of healers assembled to assist Saskia. As they wheeled Thelma into emergency care, Douglas held Lyra back, kneeling to her level. Your mama is going to be in there for a while, he said gently. The healers need to help her, and we'd just be in the way. But she's safe now. I promise you, she's safe. Are you really a king? Lyra asked, her small face serious. I am. And you're really going to save my mama? I'm going to do everything in my power to save her, Douglas promised. But Lyra, I need to ask you something important. Can you be very brave for me? Lyra nodded. Your mama said she's my mate. Do you know what that means? It means you're supposed to be together, Lyra said with the simple certainty of a child. Like in my storybooks. The prince and the princess are mates, and they live happily ever after. Something like that, Douglas agreed. But if your mama and I are mates, that makes you my daughter. Do you understand? Lyra studied him with those dark eyes that were so like Thelma's. Are you my papa? The question shouldn't have hit as hard as it did. Douglas had already done the math. Already knew Lyra was his. But hearing her ask it directly, with such vulnerable hope, cracked something in his chest. Yes, he said. I'm your papa. Lyra considered this for a long moment. Then she threw her arms around his neck and burst into tears. Not sad tears. Relief tears. The kind that came from carrying a burden too heavy for a 5-year-old and finally being able to set it down. I knew it, she sobbed against his shoulder. I knew you'd come. Mama said my papa was strong and kind and somewhere far away. But I knew if we just waited, you'd find us. Douglas held his daughter while she cried, the mate bond pulsing with Thelma's distant awareness of this moment. Through the bond, he felt her joy mixing with her fear. Her relief that Lyra finally had a father, her terror about the consequences of him finding them. When Lyra's tears finally subsided, Douglas carried her to a private waiting area. Corbin was already there, his expression carefully neutral. The prisoners are in custody, Corbin reported. Dayron is demanding their immediate release and filing formal complaints with every governing body he can think of. The other territorial leaders from the summit are requesting emergency meetings. And there are approximately 100 messages from various officials asking what the hell just happened. Ignore all of it, Douglas said. My priority is Thelma and Lyra. Everything else can wait. Your Majesty. Everything else can wait. Douglas's tone left no room for argument. Corbin sighed. Understood. I'll handle the political fallout as best I can. But Douglas, you need to understand, walking out of that summit, assaulting Veyron's men regardless of their crimes, refusing diplomatic protocol, you've just handed every territorial leader ammunition to question your judgment. Some will call for your removal from power. Others will use this as justification to break treaties. The political stability of the entire continent just became significantly more fragile. I know, Douglas said quietly. And I'd do it again. Through the bond, he felt Thelma's consciousness flickering as sedatives took effect. Her love for him. Her terror of what she'd cost him. Her desperate wish that she'd made different choices 6 years ago. And underneath it all, the poison continuing its slow, patient work of destroying her from the inside out. Douglas held his daughter and waited for news from the healers, knowing that the hardest battles were still ahead. But for the first time in 6 years, he had his mate within reach. He wasn't letting go again. Not for politics, not for diplomacy, not for anything. So a 5-year-old just accidentally caused an international incident, reunited her parents who don't know they're her parents yet, and watched the Alpha King personally dismantle 3 grown men in an alley. Lyra Harris is my new hero. Subscribe immediately, because this child is about to accidentally negotiate peace treaties while her mother recovers and her father declares war on anyone who looks at his family wrong. Also, there's poison involved. Because of course there is. Thelma woke 3 days later in the Royal Medical Wing, surrounded by monitoring equipment and a kind of luxury she'd forgotten existed. Soft sheets. Temperature-controlled air. The absence of fear that someone was hunting her. The first thing she saw was Douglas, asleep in a chair beside her bed. He looked exhausted, his formal clothes rumpled, dark circles under his eyes. Like he hadn't left her side since they'd arrived. The second thing she saw was Lyra, curled up in his lap, also asleep. Her small hand was wrapped around her father's much larger one, their connection already established in the unconscious trust of a child who'd finally found safety. The mate bond pulsed between Thelma and Douglas, stronger than she remembered. 6 years of distance hadn't weakened it, just put it in a kind of stasis. Now that they were close again, it was reasserting itself with devastating intensity. She could feel Douglas's emotions even while he slept, protectiveness, love, fury at whoever had hurt her, and desperate determination to keep her alive. Thelma tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Pain lanced through her ribs, and various machines around her bed started beeping alarmingly. Douglas woke instantly, his gold eyes finding hers with laser focus. Relief flooded the mate bond so intensely it made Thelma's breath catch. "You're awake," he said, his voice rough from sleep. "I'm awake," Thelma confirmed. "How long was I?" 3 days. Saskia had to perform 2 emergency surgeries to repair internal damage. You've been in and out of consciousness, mostly sedated for the pain. Douglas gently shifted Lyra in his arms, settling her more comfortably without waking her. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got beaten to death and then resurrected," Thelma said honestly. "Which is close to what happened, I guess." "The beating you'll recover from," Douglas replied. "The poison is more complicated." Thelma's stomach sank. "How bad is it?" Before Douglas could answer, Saskia Winterbourne entered, carrying a tablet and wearing an expression that did not inspire confidence. "Lady Thelma, you're awake." "Good. We need to discuss your condition." Saskia glanced at Lyra. "Perhaps somewhere more private?" "She can hear it," Thelma said. "She's been living with my condition for years. She deserves to know the truth." Saskia nodded, pulling up a chair. Very well. I've completed a full analysis of the poison in your system. It's definitely Thornvale extract, a rare substance that's been banned in most territories for 2 centuries because of its horrific effects. In small doses over time, it causes gradual organ failure that mimics natural illness. The victim appears to be simply wasting away. 6 years, Douglas said. She's been poisoned for 6 years. Based on the concentration in her blood and the accumulated damage to her liver, kidneys, and heart, yes. 6 years of consistent low-level exposure. Saskia met Thelma's eyes. Whoever did this to you wanted you to suffer slowly. They wanted to watch you deteriorate while being unable to stop it. How long do I have? Thelma asked quietly. Without treatment? 3 months, possibly less. The poison has reached critical saturation. Your organs are beginning to fail. Through the mate bond, Thelma felt Douglas's world shatter. With treatment, he demanded. That's complicated, Saskia admitted. Thornvale extract bonds to magical signatures in werewolf blood. The only cure is a complete magical purge through a bonding ceremony. The bond between mates creates enough magical energy to burn the poison out of the system. Then we complete the bonding ceremony, Douglas said immediately. Today. Now. Your Majesty, it's not that simple. Saskia pulled up readings on her tablet. The poison was designed specifically to prevent bonding ceremonies. When Lady Thelma's magical signature combines with yours through the bond, it will activate the dormant toxin. All 6 years of accumulated poison will flood her system at once. It will either cure her or kill her. There's no middle ground. The silence that followed was crushing. Thelma had known this was coming. The threatening letter she'd received 6 years ago had been explicit: complete the bonding ceremony and die with her unborn child, or run and live long enough to raise Lyra before the poison eventually killed her anyway. She'd chosen to run. Chosen to have 6 years with her daughter rather than dying immediately. But now that choice was coming due. What are the survival rates? Douglas asked, his voice carefully controlled. Unknown. I can find only 3 historical cases of Thornvale poisoning where bonding ceremonies were attempted. 2 died during the purge. 1 survived but was left magically crippled. Saskia's expression was sympathetic. Your Majesty, I have to be honest, the odds are not good. But there's a chance, Thelma said. 1 in 3 survived. A small chance, yes. Then we take it, Douglas decided. Douglas, wait, Thelma started. No. His tone was firm. We're not waiting. The alternative is watching you die slowly over the next 3 months. At least with the bonding ceremony, you have a chance. But if I die during the purge, you die too, Thelma protested. That's how bonding ceremonies work. If one mate dies during the ritual, the magical feedback kills the other. You'd be risking your life on a 1 in 3 chance. I don't care. You should care. You're the Alpha King. Your territory needs you. You can't just. Thelma. Douglas leaned forward, his eyes burning with intensity. I've spent 6 years searching for you. 6 years wondering what happened, if you were alive, if I'd ever see you again. Now I find out you've been slowly poisoned this entire time, running and suffering to protect our daughter. So no, I don't care about the political implications. I don't care about the risk. We're completing the bonding ceremony, and we're both surviving it. How can you be so sure? Because I refuse to lose you again. Douglas's hand found hers. And because Lyra needs both her parents. She's already lost 6 years with me. I won't let her lose you too. At the mention of her name, Lyra stirred in Douglas's lap, her eyes opening slowly. She saw her mother awake and immediately scrambled across to the bed, careful not to jostle Thelma's injuries. Mama. You're okay. I'm okay, sweet girl, Thelma confirmed, pulling Lyra close despite the pain it caused. The king saved you. Just like I knew he would. Lyra looked at Douglas with absolute trust. I told you he was strong and kind. Through the mate bond, Thelma felt Douglas's overwhelming love for this child he'd just met. Their daughter. The product of a love he'd thought lost forever. Lyra, Thelma said gently, the healers need to do something that might be dangerous. To help Mama get better. But there's a chance it might not work. Will it make you not sick anymore? Lyra asked with heartbreaking directness. If it works, yes. Then you should do it. Lyra's logic was simple and devastating. Because being a little bit dangerous is better than being sick forever. Out of the mouths of children. Douglas smiled, the expression transforming his face. She's right, you know. Sometimes you have to take risks for the chance at something better. When did you become such a gambler? Thelma asked. The moment a 5-year-old grabbed my hand and asked me to save her mother, Douglas replied. Everything since then has been one gamble after another. Saskia cleared her throat. If you're serious about attempting the bonding ceremony, we need to prepare. The ritual requires specific conditions, and given the poison's advanced state, we should move quickly. How quickly? Douglas asked. Within the week, ideally. Any longer and the poison might progress beyond the point where even a successful purge would save her. Then we do it in 3 days, Douglas decided. That gives us time to prepare the ritual properly while not delaying so long that the risk increases. Your Majesty, there's also the political situation to consider, Saskia said carefully. Lord Veyron has been making accusations. The Continental Council is demanding your presence to answer for the assault on his men. Completing a bonding ceremony in the middle of a political crisis might not be wise. I don't care, Douglas said flatly. Veyron and the Council can wait. My mate's life can't. After Saskia left to begin preparations, Thelma pulled Douglas close, Lyra nestled between them. Tell me everything, Douglas requested quietly. No more secrets. No more running. I need to know what we're really facing. So Thelma told him. About receiving the threatening letter the night before their original bonding ceremony 6 years ago. About having herself tested and discovering she'd been poisoned without her knowledge. About the letter's explicit warning, complete the ceremony and die with her unborn child, or disappear and survive long enough to raise Lyra. About 6 years of running. Moving from territory to territory whenever Veyron's trackers got too close. Working menial jobs for cash, avoiding anything that might create paper trails. Watching Lyra grow up without a father, without stability, without the life Thelma had dreamed of giving her. About Veyron's obsession. How he'd tried to claim Thelma before she'd met Douglas. How her rejection had humiliated him publicly. How he'd spent 6 years hunting her not just for revenge but because she knew something that made her dangerous. What do you know that scared him so badly? Douglas asked. Thelma hesitated, then reached into the bag of belongings that had been saved from the alley. She pulled out a waterproof packet, its edges worn from years of being carried everywhere. I was working as a researcher in the Continental Archives 6 years ago, she explained. I found documents that had been sealed for 3 centuries. Documents about how the Continental Council was really formed. She handed the packet to Douglas. He opened it carefully, scanning the ancient papers inside. His expression darkened with every line he read. This is... Thelma, do you understand what this means? That the Council's authority isn't based on democratic agreement like everyone believes. It's based on a blood curse. The founding Alphas performed a ritual that bound all werewolf territories to the Council's decisions. Made rebellion impossible. Made their power absolute. And you're saying this curse is still active? I'm saying the Council has been using magical compulsion to maintain their authority for 300 years. Every territorial leader thinks they're making free choices, but they're actually bound by ancient magic. Thelma met his eyes. When I discovered this, I refused Veyron's advances. He realized I'd never share what I'd learned with someone I didn't trust. So he tried to claim me forcibly. When that failed, he decided to silence me permanently. Douglas processed this information with growing horror. The other council members, do they know about the curse? Some suspect. But Veyron is the only one who knows for certain that I have proof. He's been trying to kill me before I can expose the truth and destroy the council's power structure. Why didn't you tell me this 6 years ago? Because I knew what you'd do. Thelma's voice was sad. You'd challenge the council. Try to break the curse. And the magical backlash would probably kill you. So I kept the documents, kept running, and hoped I'd survive long enough to figure out a way to break the curse safely. And did you? Figure out a safe way? No, Thelma admitted. The curse is designed to kill anyone who challenges it. The only way to break it is coordinated rebellion from multiple territorial leaders simultaneously. But getting enough leaders to risk their lives on a conspiracy theory backed by ancient documents? That's impossible. Douglas looked at the papers again, his mind clearly racing through political calculations. Douglas, please, Thelma said urgently. I know that look. Whatever you're thinking, don't. The curse is secondary to your survival. To Lyra's safety. We can deal with the council after. After what? After you're cured? After we're bonded? Douglas shook his head. Thelma, the bonding ceremony creates a massive surge of magical energy. If there's a curse designed to kill people who know about it and try to share that knowledge with others, what do you think will happen when we complete the bond and suddenly I have full access to everything you know? The implication hit Thelma like ice water. The curse will activate, she whispered. It'll see me sharing the knowledge with you through the bond, and it'll try to kill us both. Exactly. So we have two options: don't complete the bonding ceremony and watch you die from poison, or complete the ceremony and potentially trigger a curse that's even more deadly than the poison. There has to be a third option. There is, Douglas said quietly. Break the curse before we attempt the bonding ceremony. Remove the threat so that when we complete the bond, there's no magical backlash waiting to kill us. That's insane. You can't break a 300-year-old curse in 3 days. Then I'll have to work very quickly. Douglas stood, still holding Lyra, and pulled out his communication device. Corbin, I need an emergency meeting with every territorial leader who remained in Viridia after the summit. Tell them it's mandatory. Tell them I have information about Continental Council corruption that affects all of us. And tell them if they don't attend, they're forfeiting their right to complain about whatever I do next. Through the bond, Thelma felt his determination. His absolute certainty that he could somehow accomplish the impossible. You're going to tell them about the curse, she realized. I'm going to give them a choice, Douglas corrected. Remain under the council's magical control, or risk breaking free. Some will choose safety. Some will choose freedom. We need enough to choose freedom. How many is enough? According to your documents? 9 territorial leaders rejected the council's authority simultaneously. I can be one. That leaves 8 more to be convinced. In 3 days. In 3 days, Douglas agreed. While also preparing for a bonding ceremony that might kill us both and managing the political fallout from assaulting Veyron's men. You're insane, Thelma said. That's what our daughter would call being brave or stupid. Douglas smiled at Lyra. She'd probably say both. Lyra, who'd been listening to the entire conversation with wide eyes, spoke up with perfect 5-year-old logic. If the bad magic tries to hurt Mama and Papa, can't you just tell it no? You're a king. Kings tell things what to do. If only it were that simple. But Douglas knelt beside the bed, bringing himself to Lyra's level. You know what? You're absolutely right. I am a king. And kings protect their families. So I'm going to tell this bad magic that it can't hurt your mama. And if it doesn't listen, I'm going to break it into so many pieces it can never hurt anyone again. Promise? Lyra asked seriously. Promise, Douglas confirmed. Through the mate bond, Thelma felt his absolute conviction. He would break the curse or die trying. Would risk everything for the chance to keep his family safe. It was terrifying and inspiring in equal measure. I'm coming with you, she said. To the meeting with the territorial leaders. They need to hear this from me, from someone who's been hunted for 6 years because of what she knows. You're barely conscious, Douglas protested. Then I'll be barely conscious in a wheelchair at that meeting. Thelma's tone left no room for argument. These are my documents. My discovery. I'm not letting you face this alone. Through the bond, Douglas felt her determination matching his own. Together, then, he said. Together, Thelma agreed. And Lyra, nestled between her parents, smiled with the simple confidence of a child who believed in happy endings. See, she said. I told you you'd save Mama. Kings always save people. Douglas met Thelma's eyes over their daughter's head, the mate bond pulsing with shared purpose. They had 3 days to break a 300-year-old curse, survive a potentially lethal bonding ceremony, and somehow manage not to start a continental war in the process. No pressure at all. The emergency meeting took place in Shadow Peak's Grand Council chamber, a circular room designed for exactly this kind of high-stakes negotiation. 17 territorial leaders had remained in Viridia after the summit's abrupt adjournment, some out of curiosity, some because they had nowhere pressing to be, and some because they wanted to watch the political fallout from Douglas's unprecedented decision. Now they assembled in the council chamber, their expressions ranging from hostile to intrigued to carefully neutral. Lord Veyron Ashcroft sat at the far end of the circle, his face a mask of aristocratic disdain. His 3 men were still in Shadow Peak custody, a fact that clearly enraged him. Douglas entered with Thelma in a wheelchair beside him and Lyra holding his hand. The child's presence caused immediate murmuring. Bringing a 5-year-old to a territorial council meeting was unprecedented and highly irregular. Your Majesty, Lord Phineas Greymark from the Silverwood territory began, his tone carefully measured, we appreciate the invitation, but this meeting is highly unusual. We were told you have information about council corruption? I do, Douglas confirmed, helping Thelma settle her wheelchair at the table's center. Information that affects every territory represented here. Information that the Continental Council has been hiding for 3 centuries. Bold claims, Veyron sneered. I suppose your mate is the source of this supposed information? Thelma Harris discovered sealed documents in the Continental Archives 6 years ago, Douglas replied calmly. Documents that Veyron has been trying to suppress ever since. Documents that explain why he spent 6 years hunting her across multiple territories, poisoning her, and attempting to silence her permanently. The room went very quiet. You're accusing Lord Veyron of attempted murder? Lady Isolde Ravencroft from the Nightshade territory asked, her purple eyes sharp with interest. I'm stating facts. Thelma has been poisoned with Thornvale extract for 6 years. My healers can provide medical evidence. Veyron's men were caught beating her to death in an alley. Multiple witnesses can confirm that. And the reason for all of this? Douglas pulled out the waterproof packet. These documents, which prove that the Continental Council's authority is based not on democratic agreement, but on a magical curse. That got everyone's attention. Douglas spread the ancient papers across the table, allowing the territorial leaders to examine them. Thelma watched their expressions shift from skepticism to shock as they read. This is impossible, someone breathed. These documents are 300 years old, Thelma said, her voice steady despite her weakness. Sealed in the deepest archives, hidden behind magical wards that took me 6 months to break through. They detail the blood curse the founding alphas created to ensure their authority couldn't be challenged. Every territorial leader since has been operating under magical compulsion without knowing it. You expect us to believe we're being controlled by ancient magic? Veyron scoffed. This is ridiculous. Those documents are obvious forgeries designed to undermine the Council's legitimate authority. Then test it, Douglas challenged. Try to genuinely reject the Council's authority. Not as a political statement, but as an actual repudiation. Speak the words, I reject the Continental Council's authority over my territory. See what happens. The room filled with uncomfortable silence. This is absurd, Lord Veyron insisted. I'm not participating in this theatrical. I'll do it, Phineas interrupted. He stood, his expression determined. I reject the Continental Council's authority over my territory. The reaction was immediate and visceral. Phineas gasped, clutching his chest as magical pain lanced through him. His face went white, and for a moment it looked like he might collapse. The pain faded only when he stammered a recantation, claiming he didn't mean the words. Every territorial leader in the room had gone completely still. The curse is real, Douglas said into the shocked silence. It's been controlling all of us for 300 years. Making rebellion impossible. Ensuring the Council's power remains absolute. And anyone who discovers this truth becomes a target for elimination. He looked directly at Veyron. That's why you've been hunting Thelma. Not just because she rejected you. Not just for revenge. But because she has proof that the Council's entire power structure is based on magical coercion rather than legitimate governance. Veyron's expression was murderous, but he didn't deny it. Even if this curse exists, Lady Isolde said carefully, what exactly are you proposing we do about it? If speaking against the Council causes that kind of pain, how could we possibly resist? The curse is designed to prevent individual rebellion, Thelma explained. It targets anyone who challenges the Council alone. But there's a weakness, simultaneous coordinated rejection. If enough territorial leaders reject the Council's authority at exactly the same moment, the curse's targeting mechanism fails. It can't kill multiple people simultaneously. The conflicting commands create feedback that breaks the spell entirely. How many is enough? Phineas asked, still recovering from his test. 9, Douglas replied. 9 territorial leaders speaking the rejection simultaneously. I've already committed. That leaves 8 more willing to take the risk. The room erupted in debate. Some leaders were outraged at the suggestion. Others were intrigued but terrified. A few were openly hostile to Douglas for even proposing something so dangerous. Lyra, who'd been sitting quietly beside her father's chair, suddenly stood up. Excuse me, she said in her clear, small voice. Can I say something? The territorial leaders looked down at her with varying degrees of patience. Child, this is a matter for adults, someone began. But adults are the ones who made the bad magic, Lyra interrupted with devastating 5-year-old logic. And adults are the ones who keep following it even though it hurts people. So maybe a kid should get to talk too. Several leaders looked taken aback. Douglas hid a smile. Very well, Isolde said, genuine curiosity in her voice. What would you like to say? Lyra looked around the circle with heartbreaking seriousness. When the bad men were hurting Mama, I was really scared, she began. I didn't know what to do. But I knew if I didn't ask for help, Mama would die. So I ran to the king because he looked strong and kind. And I was right. He saved her. She paused, letting that sink in. Now Mama and Papa are trying to save everyone from bad magic that makes you do things you don't want to do. And you're all scared because it might hurt. But isn't that what being strong means? Helping even when it's scary? The simplicity of it landed like a punch. She's right, Isolde said quietly. We've all felt it. Decisions we made that didn't align with our territory's interests, but we felt compelled to follow anyway. We attributed it to politics, to pressure, to strategic necessity. But it's been magic this entire time. And you want to break that control based on a child's appeal to morality? Veyron asked, his tone dripping with contempt. I want to break it because it's the truth, Phineas countered. Because our territories deserve leaders who make genuine choices rather than following magical compulsion disguised as law. One by one, other leaders spoke up. Some in support. Some opposed. The debate raged while Thelma grew visibly weaker in her wheelchair. Finally, Douglas called for a decision. Those willing to attempt breaking the curse through simultaneous rejection, stand. Isolde stood immediately. Then Phineas. Then Lady Thessaly Ironwood from the Thornwick territory, her expression determined. 4 others followed, bringing the total to 7. Not enough. They needed 9. The remaining leaders were shaking their heads, unwilling to risk it. Too much uncertainty. Too much danger. Please, Lyra said, and her voice cracked with tears. Please don't let the bad magic keep hurting people. My mama has been sick my whole life because of it. Other people are probably sick too. If you can stop it, shouldn't you try? The 2 holdouts, Lord Caius Stormright and Lady Meridwen Ashenheart, looked at each other. Then at Lyra. Then at the documents spread across the table. Lord Caius stood first. The child is right. If we can end this curse, we have an obligation to try. Lady Meridwen followed. Agreed. Though I reserve the right to haunt all of you if this kills me. 9 total. Just enough. But before Douglas could begin organizing the actual ritual, Ravenna burst into the chamber, her expression urgent. Your Majesty, we have a situation. The Continental Council has learned about this meeting. They're sending enforcers to arrest everyone involved and execute you for treason. We have maybe 30 minutes before they arrive. The revelation sent shock waves through the assembled leaders. They know, Thelma said, her voice weak. The curse itself probably alerted them. It's designed to protect itself. Then we do this now, Douglas decided. Ravenna, seal the chamber. No one gets in or out until we're done. Your Majesty, if the enforcers arrive and find us barricaded. They'll have to wait, Douglas interrupted. We're breaking this curse now, or we're not breaking it at all. The 9 territorial leaders formed a circle, Douglas at the center with Thelma beside him and Lyra clutching both their hands. The child refused to leave, and Douglas didn't have the heart to force her away. Saskia had prepared a synchronized mechanism, a magical trigger that would allow all 9 leaders to speak the rejection words at precisely the same moment. If even one person spoke early or late, the curse would kill them individually instead of breaking. Outside the chamber, they could hear the enforcers arriving. Shouting. The sound of forces attempting to breach the magically sealed doors. We have to do this now, Corbin urged from his position guarding the entrance. Douglas looked around the circle. 9 leaders willing to risk death for freedom. For the possibility of genuine choice rather than magical coercion. On my mark, he said. 3, 2, 1. Now. 9 voices spoke in perfect unison. I reject the Continental Council's authority over my territory. The curse activated with devastating force. Every leader in the circle screamed as magical agony tore through them. It felt like being burned alive from the inside out, every nerve ending on fire, every cell in their bodies rebelling against the command to reject the ancient magic. Lyra screamed too, caught in the overflow of magical energy, and Douglas's heart nearly stopped. But Thelma held their daughter close, protecting her with what little strength she had left. The curse was designed to kill rebels. To make rejection so agonizing that no one would ever attempt it again. 9 simultaneous rejections created a paradox the spell couldn't process. The feedback built and built, magical energy crackling through the air like lightning. Then the curse shattered. The sound was like reality breaking, a resonance that every werewolf in a 100-mile radius would later report feeling in their bones. 3 centuries of magical compulsion obliterated in a single coordinated act of rebellion. The pain stopped. Complete, sudden absence of agony. The 9 territorial leaders collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath, shocked they were still alive. Outside the chamber, the enforcers who'd been trying to break through suddenly stopped. Through the doors, Douglas could hear their confusion. The magical compulsion that had been driving them to arrest the rebels was gone. They were making their own choices for the first time in their lives. Some left. Some stayed. But none of them burst through the doors with weapons drawn. The curse was broken. Douglas pulled Thelma and Lyra into his arms, the 3 of them shaking with exhaustion and relief and overwhelming joy. "We did it," Thelma whispered. "We actually did it." "Told you," Lyra said with perfect 5-year-old confidence. "Papa's a king. Kings can do anything." But the celebration was short-lived. Thelma suddenly convulsed in Douglas's arms, her body seizing as the poison in her system reacted to the massive magical discharge from breaking the curse. "Saskia!" Douglas roared. The healer was there immediately, her hands glowing with diagnostic magic. Her expression went from concerned to terrified in seconds. "The curse breaking released magical energy that's interacting with the poison. It's accelerating the deterioration. Your Majesty, we need to do the bonding ceremony now." "Not in 3 days. Now. Or she'll be dead within the hour." Douglas looked at the chaos around him. The 9 territorial leaders still recovering. The enforcers outside who might or might not still be hostile. The political catastrophe they'd just unleashed. None of it mattered. "Prepare the ritual," he commanded. "We're doing this immediately." "Papa," Lyra said, her small voice terrified. "Is Mama going to die?" Douglas pulled his daughter close, the mate bond screaming warnings as Thelma's life force flickered. "Not if I have anything to say about it," he promised. But for the first time since this nightmare began, Douglas wasn't sure he could keep that promise. The bonding ceremony was the only thing that could save Thelma now. And it might kill them both in the process. "Let me get this straight," Douglas just convinced 9 territorial leaders to commit coordinated treason, broke a 300-year-old curse with 30 minutes and 1 very brave 5-year-old, and now has to complete an emergency bonding ceremony that has a 2 in 3 chance of killing both him and his mate. Also, there are probably still enforcers outside trying to figure out if they should arrest everyone or join the revolution. Subscribe now, because Lyra is about to watch her parents either save each other or die trying, and I promise you won't be emotionally prepared for either outcome. The bonding chamber was a sacred space in the heart of Shadow Peak Hold, used only for the most important werewolf rituals. Ancient stone walls covered in carved symbols that predated written history. A circular floor marked with silver inlay depicting the phases of the moon. And at the center, a raised platform where mates completed the ceremony that would bind them for life. Saskia and her team worked with desperate speed to prepare the space. Normally a bonding ceremony required days of preparation, ritual purification, gathering of specific magical components. They had minutes. Thelma was barely conscious as Douglas carried her to the platform. The poison, accelerated by the curse's breaking, was shutting down her organs one by one. Her breathing was labored. Her heartbeat erratic. Through the mate bond, Douglas could feel her slipping away. "Stay with me," he murmured against her hair. "Just a few more minutes. Stay with me." Lyra followed them, her small face streaked with tears. Corbin tried gently to take her out of the chamber, but she fought him with surprising strength. "No. I need to be here. Mama needs me." "Sweet girl," Thelma managed, her voice barely audible, "you can't be in here during the ceremony. It's too dangerous. The magical energy could hurt you." I don't care, Lyra sobbed. I'm not leaving you. Through the mate bond, Douglas felt Thelma's heart breaking. She wanted to send Lyra away, to protect her from watching her parents potentially die. But she also understood their daughter's desperate need to be present. Let her stay, Douglas decided. At the edge of the chamber, behind the protective wards. But let her stay. Saskia set up additional magical barriers, creating a safe zone where Lyra could witness the ceremony without being harmed by the energy discharge. The child pressed against the invisible barrier, her small hands flat against the magic, watching her parents with terrified hope. Your Majesty, Saskia said quietly, I need to explain what's going to happen. The moment the bonding completes, 6 years of accumulated Thornvale poison will flood Lady Thelma's system. Her body will try to purge it through the mate bond, which means you'll experience the poison's effects too. It's going to feel like dying. For both of you. Will we survive? Douglas asked. I don't know. The magical energy from a mate bond is powerful, but 6 years of poison is a massive amount of toxin. You'll need to be stronger than the poison. Both of you. If either of you gives up, if either of you stops fighting, you'll both die. Then we don't give up, Douglas said simply. He laid Thelma gently on the platform, arranging her carefully so she'd be as comfortable as possible. Her eyes opened, focusing on his face with visible effort. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm sorry I ran. Sorry I kept Lyra from you. Sorry I dragged you into this mess. You saved our daughter's life, Douglas replied. You survived 6 years of hell to give her a chance at living. There's nothing to apologize for. If I die during this, you're not dying. But if I do, promise me you'll take care of Lyra. Promise me she'll know she was loved. That I didn't leave her by choice. Thelma. Promise me, Douglas. Through the mate bond, he felt her terror. Not for herself, but for their daughter. The thought of leaving Lyra alone in the world was more terrifying to Thelma than death itself. I promise, Douglas said, his voice rough with emotion. But I'm not raising our daughter alone. We're both surviving this. We're both going to watch her grow up. Together. Saskia began the ritual, speaking ancient words in a language that predated modern werewolf society. The silver inlay on the floor began to glow, responding to the ceremonial magic. Douglas took Thelma's hands, intertwining their fingers. The bonding words were simple. Deceptively so. But they carried the weight of an unbreakable vow. I, Douglas Huerta, claim you, Thelma Harris, as my mate. In this life and all others. Through joy and sorrow, strength and weakness, I bind myself to you. What was separate becomes one. What was incomplete becomes whole. Thelma's response was barely audible, but the magic heard it. I, Thelma Harris, accept your claim, Douglas Huerta. In this life and all others. Through joy and sorrow, strength and weakness, I bind myself to you. What was separate becomes one. What was incomplete becomes whole. The mate bond, which had been dormant for 6 years, activated with explosive force. Douglas felt the connection slam into place, stronger and deeper than anything he'd experienced before. Thelma's emotions flooded him, love and fear and desperate hope. Her memories cascaded through the bond, 6 years of running, of hiding, of watching over their shoulder for threats. 6 years of loving Lyra, of teaching her to be brave and kind and strong. And underneath it all, 6 years of missing him. Of wanting to come back but being too terrified of the consequences. Then the poison activated. Thelma screamed as 6 years of accumulated Thornvale extract flooded her system all at once. The toxin, dormant and dispersed throughout her body, consolidated into a killing dose that would have dropped a normal werewolf in seconds. Through the mate bond, Douglas felt it too. Felt the poison trying to destroy them both. It burned through their veins like liquid fire, attacking every organ, every cell, trying to tear apart the bond they'd just created. Douglas held Thelma's hand so tightly he was probably breaking bones, but he didn't let go. Couldn't let go. The bond was trying to purge the poison, burning it out with magical energy, but the toxin was fighting back. "Stay with me," Douglas commanded through gritted teeth. "Thelma, stay with me. Don't you dare leave me again." "Trying," Thelma gasped. "Hurts. God, it hurts." "I know. I can feel it. But we're stronger than this. We survived 6 years apart. We're not dying now that we're finally together." Through the bond, he poured every ounce of his strength into her. His alpha power, his will to survive, his desperate love for her and for their daughter. Thelma matched him, pulling on reserves she shouldn't have had. The poison was trying to convince her body to shut down, to accept death as inevitable. But Thelma Harris had spent 6 years running from death. She wasn't giving up now. The magical energy built to unbearable levels. The silver inlay on the floor blazed so brightly it was painful to look at. Saskia and her healers worked frantically, trying to stabilize them both as the poison fought against the purge. At the edge of the chamber, Lyra pressed against the protective barrier, tears streaming down her face. "Don't die," she sobbed. "Please don't die. Please." The child's voice cut through the agony, and both Douglas and Thelma heard it through the bond. Their daughter. The reason Thelma had survived 6 years of hell. The reason Douglas had never stopped searching. The little girl who'd interrupted a continental summit with bloody hands and absolute trust that someone would help. They couldn't leave her. Wouldn't leave her. The poison reached its peak intensity, trying one final devastating assault to kill them both. For a terrible moment, Douglas thought it might succeed. Thought they'd come so close only to fail at the last moment. Then Thelma's hand tightened around his, and through the bond, he felt her choice. She chose to live. Chose him. Chose their daughter. Chose the future they could build together. And that choice, that absolute refusal to give up, tipped the balance. The mate bond's magical energy overwhelmed the poison, burning it out of their systems in one final explosive purge. The toxin screamed, if poison could scream, as it was destroyed completely, removed from Thelma's body as if it had never existed. The light faded. The magical energy dissipated. The bond settled into place, permanent and unbreakable. Douglas and Thelma collapsed onto the platform, gasping for breath, alive. The chamber was silent except for their labored breathing. Then Lyra's voice, small and hopeful, "Mama? Papa?" Saskia checked their vitals with shaking hands. "They're alive. The poison is gone. The bond is complete. They're alive." The protective barrier dropped, and Lyra ran to the platform, climbing up to throw her arms around both her parents. "You did it," she sobbed. "I knew you would. I knew you'd save each other." Douglas pulled his daughter close, one arm around her and the other around Thelma. Through the mate bond, he felt Thelma's overwhelming relief and joy. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually survived." "Told you we would," Douglas replied, his voice rough with emotion. Around them, the healers were checking readings, confirming what their instruments showed. The poison was completely gone. Thelma's organs, which had been failing minutes ago, were already beginning to heal. The mate bond's magic was repairing the damage the toxin had caused over 6 years. "She'll need time to fully recover," Saskia said, "but she's going to be fine." "You both are." Douglas felt tears on his face and didn't care. 6 years of searching. 6 years of wondering. 6 years of incomplete bond and unanswered questions. Finally over. Finally resolved. He had his mate. He had his daughter. And they had survived impossible odds to be together. Corbin appeared in the chamber's doorway, his expression carefully neutral. Your Majesty, the Continental Council's enforcers have withdrawn. Word of the curse breaking has spread through the city. Half the werewolf population is celebrating freedom from magical compulsion. The other half is rioting because the power structure they've known their entire lives just collapsed. Let them riot, Douglas said without letting go of his family. We'll deal with the political consequences tomorrow. Today, I'm staying right here. There's also the matter of Lord Veyron, Corbin continued. He fled during the chaos of the curse breaking. We have people searching, but he's disappeared. Tomorrow, Douglas repeated. Everything can wait until tomorrow. Through the mate bond, he felt Thelma's agreement. They'd spent 6 years being hunted, running, fighting just to survive. For one night, they deserved peace. Lyra nestled between her parents, finally safe, finally whole. Are we a family now? She asked with perfect 5-year-old directness. We've always been a family, Thelma told her. We just weren't all together yet. But now we are, Lyra said with satisfaction. Now we're all together and the bad magic is gone and the poison is gone and nobody's chasing us anymore. It sounded like a fairy tale when she said it like that. Too simple. Too perfect. But looking at his daughter's face, at Thelma's tired smile, feeling the mate bond settled warm and permanent in his chest, Douglas thought maybe sometimes fairy tales came true. Even if they came with continental political catastrophes attached. 3 months later. The Free Territories Accord was officially established on a warm spring day, with representatives from all 17 territories gathering to sign the founding documents. The Continental Council had been formally dissolved, its magical authority broken and its political legitimacy destroyed by the revelation of the centuries-old curse. In its place, the territorial leaders had created a voluntary cooperation agreement based on genuine democratic principles rather than magical compulsion. It was messy. It was complicated. Some territories had declared independence entirely, refusing to participate in any cooperative structure. Some conflicts had escalated into small skirmishes before being resolved through actual negotiation rather than magical enforcement. But it was real. Chosen. Free. Douglas stood at the signing ceremony with Thelma at his side, fully recovered from the poison and the bonding. She'd regained the weight she'd lost during 6 years of running, the color had returned to her face, and the premature gray in her hair was fading as her body healed. Lyra sat in the front row, dressed in formal clothes she'd insisted on picking out herself, watching the proceedings with serious attention. She'd become something of a celebrity among the territorial leaders, the child who'd accidentally sparked a revolution by asking for help. You know, Thelma murmured to Douglas, 3 months ago I was being beaten to death in an alley. Now I'm watching the birth of a new political era. It's surreal. That's one word for it, Douglas agreed. I prefer catastrophic success. Is that what we're calling it? What else would you call breaking a 300-year-old curse, dissolving the Continental Council, and somehow not starting a civil war? Lucky? Thelma suggested. Through the mate bond, Douglas felt her amusement and love. The bond had settled into comfortable permanence, allowing them to share emotions and thoughts without the overwhelming intensity of the first few weeks. Where's Veyron? Thelma asked, her mood darkening. Any word? Still missing. Ravenna thinks he fled to rogue territories where we don't have jurisdiction. He's too smart to try coming back here. He'll try again eventually. He's too prideful to accept defeat. Then we'll deal with him when he does. Douglas's hand found hers. Together. The signing ceremony concluded with speeches from various territorial leaders, most of whom credited Douglas and Thelma's courage for inspiring the changes. Phineas Greymark gave a particularly moving speech about choosing freedom over safety. Afterward, there was a reception where Lyra immediately found the dessert table and began negotiating with other diplomatic children over who got which pastries. She's going to be a terrifying negotiator when she grows up, Isolde observed, joining Douglas and Thelma. That child just convinced Lord Caius's son to trade 3 chocolate tarts for a single cookie by arguing the cookie was more special. She gets that from her mother, Douglas said. She gets that from you, Thelma countered. You're the one who convinced 9 territorial leaders to commit coordinated treason in under an hour. Fair point. Isolde smiled. For what it's worth, I think you both made the right choices. The curse needed to be broken. The council's power structure was corrupt. And that little girl over there deserved to have both her parents alive and free. She deserved a lot more than we gave her, Thelma said quietly. 6 years of running, of instability, of watching her mother slowly die. And she survived it, Isolde interrupted gently. She's strong and brave and kind because you taught her to be. Don't discount that. As the reception continued, Douglas and Thelma found a quiet corner where they could watch Lyra interact with the other children. She was teaching them some game that involved a lot of running and laughing. Do you have regrets? Douglas asked. About how everything happened? Thelma considered the question seriously. I regret that Lyra grew up without you. I regret the 6 years we lost. But I don't regret running when I did. It kept her alive. It kept the documents about the curse safe. In a weird way, everything that happened led to this moment. Fate? Maybe. Or maybe just a series of terrible choices that somehow worked out. Thelma leaned against him. What about you? Regrets? That I didn't find you sooner. That I didn't question the council's authority earlier. That it took a 5-year-old interrupting a summit to make me prioritize what actually mattered. You saved us, Thelma reminded him. Lyra asked for help and you gave it without hesitation. That's what mattered. Through the bond, Douglas felt her certainty. Her love. Her deep relief that they'd all survived. Lyra ran over, dragging another child by the hand. Papa, this is Saren. Her papa is Lord Caius. Can she come visit us? I told her about our library and she wants to see it. Of course she can visit, Douglas agreed, sharing an amused look with Lord Caius across the room. Excellent. Lyra beamed. We're going to read all the books about dragons. Mama, did you know Saren has never read about dragons? That's terrible. Everyone should know about dragons. Absolutely terrible, Thelma agreed seriously. We'll have to fix that immediately. The 2 girls ran off, already deep in conversation about which dragon books were essential reading. She's happy, Thelma observed. For the first time in her life, she's actually, genuinely happy. So are you, Douglas noted, feeling it through the bond. So are you, Thelma countered. They stood together, watching their daughter play with other children in a world free from magical compulsion, in a territory where they were safe and together. It had cost them 6 years of separation. Had required breaking ancient curses and defying continental authorities. Had nearly killed them both multiple times. But watching Lyra laugh with pure, uncomplicated joy, Douglas thought it had been worth every impossible moment. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For surviving. For being strong enough to run when you had to. For raising our daughter to be brave and kind and stubborn enough to interrupt a summit when she needed help. Douglas pulled Thelma close. For coming back to me. I never really left, Thelma replied. The bond was always there. Waiting. Waiting for a 5-year-old to grab my hand and demand I save her mother. Best interruption of your life? Thelma asked, echoing his earlier words. Best interruption of my life, Douglas confirmed. And across the reception hall, Lyra Harris-Huerta laughed with her new friend, blissfully unaware that her simple act of asking for help had changed the political landscape of an entire continent. Sometimes the bravest thing you could do was ask for help. Sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was give it. And sometimes, a 5-year-old covered in blood changed the entire world just by trusting the right person. A 5-year-old interrupted the most important diplomatic meeting in werewolf history, reunited her parents, exposed a conspiracy, helped break a 300-year curse, and accidentally became the catalyst for continental political revolution? Lyra Harris went from a terrified child in an alley to the living proof that sometimes asking for help from the right person changes everything. This is what happens when children refuse to accept that the way things are is the way things have to be. They just find the strongest person in the room and demand better. Subscribe because next week's story features a woman who discovers her deceased husband had a secret daughter from another relationship, and instead of rejecting the child, she becomes her guardian, uncovers the conspiracy that killed her husband, and builds the family he never got to have while hunting down everyone responsible. It's going to absolutely wreck you in the best way possible. Real talk, did Douglas make the right choice leaving the summit to help Thelma? Or should he have sent someone else and stayed to manage the political fallout? A. Right choice, family first, always, and the summit was just politics while Thelma was literally dying in an alley. B. Wrong choice, he risked continental war and his entire political authority for one person, which is terrible leadership even if it worked out. C. Both, morally right but politically catastrophic, and he got incredibly lucky that Lyra's honesty and a curse revelation saved him from the worst consequences. D. None of this matters because a 5-year-old teaching territorial leaders how to be brave by asking one simple question is the purest thing ever written, and I will fight anyone who disagrees. Drop your answer below. And more importantly, was Lyra right to run straight to the Alpha King instead of asking guards or other adults for help first? Or did her instinct to go directly to the most powerful person in the room actually save her mother's life by cutting through all the bureaucratic nonsense that would have delayed help? Also, the moment Lyra said lying is bad during the council meeting and accidentally exposed Veyron's entire conspiracy, did that hit harder than any other line? Or was it when she told the territorial leaders isn't being strong about helping even when it's scary and shamed literal centuries-old alphas into doing the right thing? Bonus question, do you think Thelma made the right choice running 6 years ago to protect Lyra from the poison? Or should she have told Douglas immediately and trusted him to find a solution together, even with the risk? Sound off in the comments. This story proved that sometimes the most powerful political tool is a child who hasn't learned to stop asking why not, and can't you just help? Real change requires real honesty. And apparently, 5-year-olds are better at both than we give them credit for because they haven't learned to complicate simple moral truths with politics and fear. The real question, if you were a 5-year-old who saw your mother being attacked and noticed a powerful-looking stranger through a window, would you have Lyra's courage to interrupt whatever they were doing and demand help? Or would fear of getting in trouble stop you? Because Lyra didn't know about diplomatic protocol or political consequences, she just knew her mama needed saving and that man looked strong enough to do it. That's the kind of clarity adults lose and children somehow keep. See you next week for more families built through choice rather than blood, more children accidentally solving problems adults made too complicated, and more proof that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply ask for help from someone who looks strong enough to give it.